was a lot more eyes on the sport, a lot more money and more investment in the sport. That was a bit due to COVID, obviously, because F1 carried on during COVID when a lot of other sports couldn't. And do you think at this point, like teams are willing to almost do anything to win, regarding the rule, like sort of that bit of like respect, that bit of like competitiveness between teams, sort of thrown out the window, and teams are willing to do anything. Obviously, we saw the pink Mercedes in 2020 as well. So there's quite a lot of maybe not playing by the book going on in recent seasons.
Yeah, I think that I'm not particularly sure that it's I don't think it's I think it's always been that way in Formula One. Well, certainly since maybe the sort of 80s and 90s, I think was when it got really serious. Because it was a bit more gentlemanlike, if you want, in sort of the 50s and the 60s and the early days, because everybody was sort of working together to, literally survive, as drivers, and to sort of make the F1 big, because it wasn't really back in those days. Like it was, big enough, but nothing like today. But when the 80s and 90s happened, I think that's when that sort of the serious sort of pushing of the rules came in. And we've seen many examples throughout the 1990s of teams pushing things, a bit too far, arguably, and then getting caught and then getting. So I don't think that's a new thing. But I do think there is different teams do have different mentalities. And I think Red Bull, they are a win at all costs kind of mentality. And although Toto Wolff, as you say, said that sort of tongue-in-cheek thing, I don't think Mercedes, the thing is for Mercedes, they can't be seen to be, this is quite an interesting thing with Mercedes, is to me, they can't afford to be seen to be cheating, because they're such a huge brand. They've got such a huge reputation. We saw what happened with Volkswagen and Audi with the diesel emissions scandal that happened about, must have been 10 years ago or something like that. And their sort of like sales and everything went plummeted because people were like, oh, well, they're not a very, trustworthy people. Now, you don't really need to trust the people that you're getting your energy drink from, in quite the same way that you do with like sort of high-end cars. And it's similar with Ferrari, but also Ferrari is a racing team that builds road cars. It's so fundamental on that front. Because Ferrari got, I mean, one day we'll find out exactly what happened in 20 was it 18 or 19 when Ferrari had to sort of change their engines or whatever, and then they were suddenly slow because they were pushing the boundaries and maybe cheating. DAS, when Mercedes brought DAS in, and then that got banned after a year. So I don't think any of the sort of really doing anything to win is new. I think that there are some teams who push it harder, and Red Bull are certainly probably the team on the grid that push it the hardest. I think Aston Martin are on their way there as well, with Alonso and with Lawrence Stroll being, probably up for anything to, in order to win. So yeah, I don't think that that has changed, but I think that there's just more eyeballs on the sport, so people are aware of it a
Yeah,
bit more than maybe they were in the past,